Oh Lord, I've stayed silent for far too long in this family drama where my role was never even written. I'm Ilana Monroe, the one who used to be the perfect blank space in every photo. But this story isn't just about disappearance. It's about the day I returned. Uninvited, unexpected, and made every eye stop and stare. I walked into my sister's graduation. No invitation, no seat reserved for me, yet I sat in the front row, where everyone had to look up. My father froze. My sister went silent, and exactly 40 minutes later they had to hear my name announced with the title CEO. If it were you, would you dare to come back like I did? Faced with this moment, would you stay silent or stand up? Drop a comment and share how it made you feel, or tell me about a time you were written out of your own story. Don't go anywhere. The next part will show you why my silence was the loudest response of all. They called Lydia the star. And me? If I was ever there, I was just the shadow standing beside her. This is Lydia, our future lawyer. Oh, and this is her sister. No name, no title, not even a complete introduction. As if I were a footnote someone forgot to delete in the final draft. I used to think I was being too sensitive, that maybe I was imagining it, but Lydia's graduation party shattered whatever fragile hope I had left. That day, the house looked like it had been dipped in pastel, pale pink dresses, soft blue shirts, and forced smiles from extended relatives. A banner hung across the living room read clearly, "Congratulations, Lydia, the pride of the Monroe family." I stood 3 steps away. My mother walked past without looking at me. My father raised his glass and declared, "She's the only star we've ever had. The only one." I didn't cry. I didn't react. Something inside me simply cracked, quietly. From that moment on, I stopped asking why, stopped mentioning the college I was once accepted into, stopped waiting for birthday letters, stopped looking for myself in the family Christmas photos. I remember that year's photo clearly. The whole family wore matching red, even the dog. Lydia stood in the center holding it. My parents flanked her, shoulders squared, perfect smiles. Where I once stood was now a perfectly empty space. Not cropped, not erased. They had taken a whole new photo, as if I had never existed. No one ever said I was disowned, but I learned something even more painful. You can disappear from a family without a funeral. My name is Ilana Monroe, and if you ask my father, I never existed. I can't remember the last time I came home. Maybe it was before my mother died. She was the only one in the family who once slipped a piece of paper into my coat pocket on a freezing winter day. It read, "You don't have to be loud to be powerful." I still have that paper, wrinkled and nearly faded, but the memory remains sharp. She died when I was 19. She never saw me grow up, never knew what I did with my life after. And maybe that's a blessing, because she never had to see how the rest of the family quietly erased me from existence. I used to be angry, then I was sad, but eventually those feelings melted away, like thin ice under the morning sun. What was left was a numb, colorless void. One day, I woke up and felt nothing when I saw Lydia's name on the school magazine, or when I heard my father boast about his youngest heading to Harvard Law, because I had already disappeared, long before they pushed me out. Maybe the reason I kept going was work, or more accurately, an idea. I quietly built a healthcare company from a cramped apartment, with an old laptop and spotty Wi-Fi, line by line of code, Zoom call after Zoom call, every pitch made anonymously. I never signed my real name. I left no trace linking me to Monroe. I didn't want them to know. Didn't want to give them the chance to claim it as a family success. I separated myself from everything, but in doing so, I carried one lingering question. If no one sees you, no one says your name, do you really exist? That Monday morning, I opened my laptop like I always did. A colorful email from Eastern University, Lydia's school, and the one I once walked away from, popped into my inbox. You're invited, class of 2025, commencement weekend highlights. I almost deleted it, but a small preview line made my hand freeze. Keynote speaker, to be revealed, CEO of a top rural medtech startup. I clicked it open. My heart didn't know whether to race or stop. No one knew that person was me. My real name had never appeared on any press release. All legal filings were under an alias. I had wanted peace, not recognition, just distance. But now, for the first time in years, the name Ilana Monroe, or at least the truest version of myself, was standing in the light. I stared at my laptop screen for a long time. The cursor blinked beside the words, Investor Keynote, Name to be announced. Part of me wanted to shut it all down, erase every connection. But another part, the one they once called a burden, a troublemaker, an outsider, wanted to leave it as is, wanted to walk straight onto a stage they never imagined I could stand on. A few hours later, another email came in, not directly to me, at least not intentionally. It was a forwarded thread from the family group, mistakenly sent to an old contact list. Some distant relative hadn't deleted my name yet. I read in silence. Lydia's graduation dinner menu, the seating chart, photos of her in her cap and gown. And one line from my father, written in his usual tone, precise, curt. Make sure Ilana doesn't find out. We don't need extra trouble on Lydia's day. Trouble, not sadness, not misunderstanding, but an inconvenience, a variable to eliminate. I read it 3 times. Strangely, it didn't hurt anymore. No tears, no sting of betrayal. Just something cold slipping through my chest, like wind through a loose seam. Maybe I had passed pain. Maybe what I felt now was clarity. Clarity about my place in this family. No name, no photo, no seat. And no need to ask for permission anymore. I turned off the light and sat in the dark, the glow of my laptop screen the only source of light. I looked at my reflection, a messy bun, dark circles under my eyes, and an old hoodie bearing the logo of a company no one knew I founded. If they didn't see me, did I really exist? Or was I always just the blurred background, never quite bright enough? I used to believe I was the problem, that I was the complicated one, the piece that didn't fit in family portraits. But now, I saw it differently. Maybe I was just the reminder of everything they couldn't confront. Someone who didn't fit neatly, didn't nod along, didn't play the part they wrote for me. The next morning, I reopened my laptop, logged into the investor portal. The field, keynote speaker, name to display, was blank. I hovered the cursor over it, typed 3 words, Ilana Monroe, and clicked save. Not for revenge, but to exist, clearly, unapologetically. I didn't need to crash Lydia's graduation to make a scene. I just had to be in the building next door, mic in hand, with one final slide that bore my real name. That afternoon, while rummaging through a kitchen drawer for TV remote batteries, my hand brushed against an old slip of paper, a faded lunch receipt. On the back, written in blue ink, "You don't have to be loud to be powerful." My mother's handwriting. I stood still for a few minutes, still holding the paper. She died when I was 19. She never saw me grow up. Never saw the nights I stayed up building business plans, cold calling investors, developing a platform to bring healthcare to forgotten rural towns. But somehow, her words found me again, exactly when I needed them. A ping broke the silence. A message from Owen, our CTO and my co-founder. Investor Summit confirmed. Same campus, same weekend. You in? I stared at it, my heart tightening. Lydia's graduation would be across the campus, same day, same time. No need to barge onto their stage. I just needed to turn on the lights in the building next door and let them see for themselves. I booked 2 tickets, one for the summit, speaker's seat, one for the graduation, front row guest seat under a shortened alias. I didn't want attention. Not yet. I just wanted to be there, to see, and to be seen. I wanted to see my father's face when he realized that the failure was here. Not trying to join their dinner table, but sitting front and center at another stage with her name printed on the program. On the morning of departure, I packed one small suitcase, a simple black dress, my old heels, the very pair that helped me stay steady during my first pitch to investors. Back then, no one asked if I had a degree. They asked, "Do you have the numbers? Do you have the plan? Do you have a reason?" I did. And I've survived on that ever since I walked out of that house. The train passed by the old academic halls, the ones where I used to nod off during lectures, where Lydia once introduced me to her friends as the dropout tagging along. Now, my name quietly appeared on the event itinerary of the summit. I stepped onto campus. The ticket taker at graduation smiled and said, "This seat was reserved early. Looks like someone really wanted you here." I smiled back. I guess they did. I sat 3 rows in from the aisle, sunlight warming my back. Students trickled in one by one. No one recognized me. But I saw everything. And then, behind me, I heard my father's voice, low, cold, in control. He was speaking to a security guard. No shouting, just precise authority. "She's not on the list." I didn't bow my head. I didn't leave. Let him search, let him question, let him fear, because the girl he thought was erased was right here, unmistakable, complete. And no longer asking permission. I was never the type to open emails filled with confetti and dancing fonts. But that day, something made me click. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the sting of an old wound. Maybe it was the curiosity of the girl who once got erased by her family, now seeing her shadow appear in a school-wide announcement. "You're invited. Eastern University Commencement 2025. Keynote speaker, investor, CEO of one of North America's fastest-growing medtech companies." There was only a blurred silhouette, the name hidden. But I knew. It was me. I stared at the screen, hollow. Not because I was afraid of being recognized, but because for the first time after years of hiding, I saw the shadow of myself standing in the open, ready, unmasked. There was a quiet trembling, not fear, but that strange emotion that lives on the thin edge between success and solitude. I had never told anyone. No articles, no press. Not once had I linked my real name to the company. I built an empire, in the dark. A few hours later, a second email arrived. Not meant for me, but it landed in my inbox anyway. Wrong address, or maybe fate dealing a fair hand. It was a chain of messages. The sender, Ilana Monroe, my cousin. Subject, Lydia's graduation, seating chart and menu update. I wasn't planning to read it, but then my eyes stopped on a reply from my father. "Make sure Ilana doesn't know. We need everything to be perfect for Lydia." I read it slowly. Then again. Everything to be perfect, as if I were the scratch on their family mirror, as if I was the misplaced stroke that ruined their carefully painted portrait. I used to wonder, did I leave too soon? Was my silence too long? But no, this wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. This was orchestrated. This was a plan to remove. I hadn't gone back for Lunar New Year, hadn't shown up for Lydia's birthdays, hadn't replied to distant relatives' polite texts. I stayed silent, a form of self-protection, and now they were using that silence to turn me into a potential threat to be avoided. I turned off my phone, sat in the dim kitchen, lit only by the refrigerator's soft glow. I remembered all the times I looked away, the Christmas I didn't go home, the anonymous gift I sent in a plain box just to feel tethered somehow, the times I stood at the margins, waiting for an invitation that never came. I used to think silence was maturity, that it was letting go. But now I realize some truths need to be repeated intentionally. I reopened my laptop, logged back into the Investor Summit portal. My name still sat under "Not Yet Announced." I hovered my cursor over the display name field. My fingers paused. Part of me wanted to leave it blank, like always, but this time, I didn't write a pseudonym. I didn't abbreviate. I typed Ilana Monroe and clicked Save, my real name, for the first time in years, showing up without a shield. That night, I started building the final slide of my keynote. The screen showed the default line, "Thank you, flat, Hollow. Like every forced thank you I ever had to mumble as a child. I deleted it. Typed instead, Ilana Monroe, Eastern University class of never. And just below, in smaller letters, you erased me from the story, so I wrote a new chapter that can't be deleted. I hit send, leaned back in my chair. No more trembling. No more cold. No more emptiness. Only one question echoed in my head. When they turn around, will they recognize me? And if they don't, will I care? I didn't know. But I knew this. I didn't need them to see me. I only needed the light, clear enough to shine on my name. Spelled right, placed right, belonging to the right person. No drama, no warning. I just needed to show up, at the right place, at the right time. In silence. Lydia's graduation was set for Saturday, 10 a.m. The Investor Summit would begin at 10:40. Just across campus, inside the sleek glass building of the Institute of Biotechnology. Same school, same day, same hour. As if someone had designed the stage for a confrontation that didn't need words. I didn't plan to walk into her graduation like a disruptor. I only wanted to be seen. Not by Lydia, but by them. The ones who thought I had disappeared forever. I'd booked my train weeks in advance, an early ride, quiet enough to arrive without drawing attention. My luggage was simple, one small suitcase, a fitted black dress, a plain black blazer, and the same pair of worn heels that helped me stay steady during my first investor pitch. When my hands trembled but my gaze never dropped. I had stood before skeptical faces, under cold fluorescent lights, answering questions like, "What credentials do you have?" I had none. But I had a product, a vision, and a reason stronger than all of it. I had no way back. On the train to Eastvale, I looked out the window. The glass reflected my face, framed by clouds and sun. No longer the quiet girl at family dinners. No longer the one cut out of the Christmas photo. I was now a CEO. No one's permission required. The train passed the old science building, where I once dozed off during classes after late-night shifts. It was also where Lydia told her friends, "My sister dropped out. She just follows me around like a shadow." I remember that, and I remember standing behind her, hearing it without reacting. Not because I was weak, but because I was saving it, quietly. I arrived early. The graduation venue was already buzzing with signs and staff. A greeter scanned my ticket and said, "This seat was reserved early. Front row, third from the aisle. Looks like someone really wanted you here today." I gave a faint smile. I think so too. No one recognized me. No one looked too closely. My hair was neatly tied up, sunglasses on, a familiar face, but not distinct. I blended in like anyone else in the crowd, but inside me, every cell was vibrating, like the stillness before a storm. I sat down in my seat, third row from the aisle, back straight, eyes forward. The morning sun warmed my neck. Students began filing in. Up front, Lydia walked in with the graduating class, eyes ahead, polished smile, not a wrinkle on her gown. She looked exactly like the photos, perfect, chosen, adored. She'd always been good at playing her roles, the ideal daughter, the family's pride, the center of every photo. I didn't hate Lydia. I just didn't belong in the world she represented. Behind me, I heard a voice, deep, clear, sharp. "She's not on the list." I didn't turn around, but I knew that voice. My father, speaking to someone with a clipboard, maybe a guard, maybe an event coordinator. "No, that's not possible. Check again. There's no seat under the name Ilana Monroe." He was controlling the situation, as usual. No yelling, no slamming fists. Just a voice sharp enough to make people obey. I didn't move. Let him search. Let him doubt. Let him wonder. Did she dare come back? A professor walked by, looked at me once, then again. He paused. "Wait. Are you Ilana Monroe?" he whispered, eyes wide. I gave a small nod. I read your research on rural healthcare infrastructure. It was brilliant. You're speaking at the summit this morning, right? His voice wasn't loud, but just enough for a few people in the rows behind to turn their heads. I smiled, said nothing. The speakers on stage crackled to life. Music began to play. The ceremony was starting. My father was scanning the crowd, eyes narrowing, searching every face. He didn't recognize me, not because I was in disguise, but because he hadn't truly looked at me in over 10 years. He was looking for a ghost, a girl who didn't deserve a seat, not the woman now sitting in the front row, ready to step into the spotlight. Then I heard his voice again, louder this time. "If she's here, she'll cause trouble. She always does. She doesn't know how to stay silent." I didn't react, because I had stayed silent, long enough for today's voice to thunder. On stage, Lydia sat in the first row of graduates, expression calm, eyes proud, but I noticed something, a strain in her posture, a mask stretching thin, and I knew my moment was near, because in 40 minutes across campus, they would call my name. And this time, I wouldn't need to grab the mic. The mic would come to me. I never planned to stay for the whole ceremony. I didn't need to hear Lydia's name read from the list of honors. I didn't need to witness my family clapping as if the air around them had never been emptied by someone's absence. I just needed to be there, front row, right in their line of sight. Just once. Clear enough, close enough to erase forever the idea that she wouldn't dare come back. I sat still, hands resting on my lap, spine straight, chin slightly raised. Every footstep echoed in the hall like the slow ticking of fate. The seat I occupied had been reserved first, because I wanted to be present, not to ask for permission, but to reclaim my place in the version of history they tried to rewrite without me. Lydia stepped onto the stage, proud strides, head held high, shoulders squared. Her graduation gown fit perfectly, like a costume tailored to protect her. She didn't see me. Not yet, but I saw her, and every detail on the faces of my family below, eyes lifted in anticipation, phones raised, waiting to capture the perfect pride shot. Then someone behind me whispered, "Is that her? The Medvera Health CEO?" Another voice replied, "I heard she went to Eastern, but never used her name publicly." I said nothing. Didn't confirm. Didn't deny. Sometimes silence has its own gravity. My father stood near the entrance, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning every row. When his gaze swept over me, it paused for half a second, not enough to say he recognized me, but enough to betray a flicker of uncertainty. I didn't flinch. I kept my eyes forward, toward the stage, where Lydia was now accepting her diploma and bowing. She still hadn't seen me, but then something unexpected happened. One of the professors, someone who had once taught both Lydia and me, walked by my row. He slowed down, stared a bit longer. "Ilana Monroe?" he asked softly, as if to confirm a hunch. I nodded. His expression lit up like he'd stumbled upon a well-kept secret. "I read your report on the Regional Healthcare Integration Network. Brilliant work. Eastern should have celebrated you a long time ago." His voice wasn't loud, but just enough for 2 people in front to turn around, then 3 to the left, and 1 across the aisle. My name began to ripple, quietly, like the first drops of rain on a stage Lydia thought belonged to her alone. I stood up, silently, not to draw attention, but to leave. I had 20 minutes before my own appearance, across campus, on a different stage, not to be applauded as the good daughter, but to be acknowledged as the woman who built an empire with her own hands. I turned away from the stage, didn't glance back at Lydia, didn't look at my father, didn't seek out the faces of those who once believed I'd always remain outside the frame. Because I wasn't a shadow anymore, I was the light they didn't notice, until it was too late to turn away. My heels echoed on the stone floor, steady, loud, deliberate. Behind me, the ceremony continued, but ahead was the summit, the projector screen, the mic, and my name on display. No abbreviations, no aliases, no shields. Ilana Monroe, CEO, Medvera Health real name. Real title. Real voice. I wouldn't need to scream. I existed. I'd just walk out and let them realize I never left. They just weren't looking in the right direction. I walked out of the graduation ceremony in silence, leaving behind the applause and hugs as background music to a stage I no longer belonged to. The glass doors of the conference center opened wide, welcoming me with cool, sterile light. No scent of family sweat, no whispered comparisons. Just backstage staff, a humming projector, and my name, displayed on the opening slide. Closing keynote, Ilana Monroe, CEO, Medvera Health. A staff member handed me the presentation remote. "You're the first person to make every professor here go completely silent with curiosity," she said with a grin. "Even the dean thought the CEO was some reclusive Harvard guy in his 50s. I didn't answer. I was thinking about the last slide, the line I edited just before sending the final version. "You erased me from the story, so I wrote a new chapter that can't be deleted." The stage doors opened. Lights beamed down. Cameras lifted. The front row was full, the university president, investors, a few of my former professors, and in the third seat from the left, a familiar face. Lydia's professor, the one who recognized me at the ceremony, the one who leaned in and whispered in her ear just as I walked away. And now, Lydia could only lift her head, just in time to hear the MC say, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Medvera Health, the woman transforming rural healthcare through technology, Ms. Ilana Monroe." I walked out. No handheld mic, no written speech, just me and my name, spelled right, pronounced right, standing for no one but me. The room fell silent for the first 3 seconds, not because they didn't know who I was, but because they were connecting the dots. The anonymous articles, the breakthrough technologies without author photos, the research papers signed only Monroe I. Now all of it stood in front of them, flesh, voice, presence, undeniable. I spoke. "I built Medvera because no one in my family believed I could finish anything." I paused. The air thickened. And they weren't entirely wrong. I didn't finish college. I didn't finish Thanksgiving dinners. I didn't finish the role of daughter they're proud of. But I finished this. I clicked. A map appeared, dots lighting up across states, each one a rural clinic revitalized by Medvera. Next slide, images of surgeries using devices my company built. Then, a grainy old photo, me soldering wires in my dorm room. No lab, no funding, no research team, just me. And a dream no one believed was real. I looked into the audience. Lydia's professor turned toward her, still wearing her graduation robe, and whispered, just loud enough for the stage mic to catch, "Why didn't you tell us she was your sister?" The whole room held its breath. Lydia froze. I didn't need to look to know. She was staring at me for the first time, without contempt, but with fear. Not fear of me, fear that, in the carefully crafted story she'd built over the years, there was a chapter she couldn't control. I ended with a single line, not for revenge, but to close the book. They tried to erase my name from every frame, but today every slide, every article, every clinic bears that name, and it can't be deleted. I gave a slight nod. No need for applause. But it came anyway. First a few claps, then the entire room. I walked off stage. Didn't look back. Didn't wait for small talk. Didn't need a photo op. The assistant caught up to me and asked softly, "Would you like to exit through the back?" I nodded. The back door, not to hide, but because I had already walked across the front with my real name. The rest didn't matter. As I stepped out of the building, my phone buzzed. 37 unread messages, 6 missed calls. One text from my cousin. "Was that really you at the summit just now? Uncle almost fell out of his seat." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because for the first time in years, they couldn't say I wasn't there, because everywhere they looked, I had been there all along. The ceremony and the summit felt like the final pages of a tragedy long written in silence. I left the stage with slow, deliberate steps, as if each footfall was a quiet but resolute sentence. There was no need for loud declarations or fiery rage. My revenge had always come wrapped in silence, a silence so powerful it left no room for denial. As the lights from the hall faded, the judgmental words, the pale, disapproving looks from my father, and the people who once labeled me a mistake still echoed softly. But now, they were just ghosts from a past I had blurred, like faded images in an old photograph. I stepped outside into the crisp evening, where the wind wrapped around me and the sounds of the city hummed like familiar music. I didn't need to craft explanations or scream in public. My silence had already spoken volumes. Emails, messages, and calls began flooding in. Congratulations mixed with carefully worded questions. Would you be willing to share your secret to success? Do you think your family meant to forget you? But amid the noise, I replied only with brief, calculated words, each response like a coded fragment of a truth too long buried. At one point, I was just that girl. Now I was the one they had to acknowledge. Across news outlets, my name spread, a symbol of those who had once been cut off, forgotten by the very families that claimed to love them. Long-form interviews, private calls from experts and investors, they all circled the same core. The rise of Ilana Monroe, the woman who built an empire without anyone's permission. What once was my internal armor, silence, had now become a ringing anthem of personal justice. Later that evening, I walked down a quiet hotel corridor. At the front desk, the woman looked up as she checked the name on her screen and smiled gently. "Welcome, Ms. Ilana. Congratulations on your success." It wasn't just words. It was a recognition, subtle, yet filled with respect for a success born from quiet persistence. No one there knew the full story or the deep wounds that led me here. But they knew my presence wasn't a surprise anymore. It was a declaration. I realized something then. Revenge in silence doesn't mean I said nothing. It means my silence said everything. I exist. I succeeded. And I didn't need the validation of those who tried to destroy me. In the city center, neon lights flickered like reflections of the past I once inhabited. A giant billboard lit up with the logo of Medvera Health, and beneath it, Ilana Monroe, transforming the lives of thousands in rural communities. It wasn't boasting. It was truth, a reminder to anyone who had once hoped I would fail. I walked through the streets, past curious stares. One middle-aged woman recognized me, her voice trembling. "Oh my, you're Ilana Monroe, aren't you? I saw your story in the paper." I simply smiled. "Yes, I am." Each short answer was its own kind of victory, a confirmation that I was no longer the silent shadow. That night, back in my small rental apartment, I sat by the window and watched the city lights blink. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not to send, not to relive the past, but to capture thoughts. Private questions I often whispered only to myself. Do they feel the loss now that my name is gone from their story? They once promised family was forever. Did that still count when one part was erased? Can silence be the most powerful weapon and still fail to heal? Sometimes I asked myself, was my rise a form of revenge or a kind of salvation? In those unanswered questions, I found this truth. Revenge in silence doesn't come from anger or urgency. It comes from accepting the past and transforming it into a power no one can take away. In the days that followed, my voice extended far beyond speeches and summits. It echoed through each Medvera project, every rural clinic we built, every smart health system we deployed, all living proof of my presence. I accepted that my family had once tried to erase me, but now, that very silence had become an echo so loud it made people ask, who was truly here all along? The question rippled through circles of professionals, quiet interviews, and even hushed break-room conversations among health workers. On one cool, moonlit night, I drafted an email to a prominent publication. Just a short message, a quiet affirmation that even if the past tried to bury me, the future would never forget my name. Not for drama, not to demand recognition, but to say, I lived, I fought, and now I am the story they tried and failed to erase. The email was sent. No extra words, just a single message on a glowing screen, carrying the weight of a betrayal that had been forged into something luminous. Day after day, my silence became not just a statement, but a path to healing. I didn't retell the pain over and over. I didn't beg for empathy. Instead, I let my success answer every cruel whisper, every silent omission from a family that had once crafted a perfect picture, without me in it. And now, through every project, through every smile of someone finally receiving proper care, I knew. My silence was never just revenge. It was proof that even if they once tried to crop me out of the family photo, my existence would be forever etched in the pages of persistence and progress. At last, as I sat alone with a cup of black coffee in my small living room, I asked myself softly, do they understand now that revenge doesn't have to scream? Sometimes revenge is when your silence leaves such a mark, even the silence has to bow to it. And I smiled, not with pride, but with quiet reassurance, because after everything, I was no longer forgotten. I was the one who turned pain into power. I was the one who took revenge in silence. And quietly now, everything speaks my name. I never went back to the old house. Not because I was afraid, but because there was nothing left for me in the place that once called itself home. I knew, after that speech, they saw me. No longer through whispers, no longer through secondhand mentions, but through headlines, social media quotes, and a keynote video that spread without me posting it even once. I didn't upload a photo, didn't write a caption. I let the truth travel, silently, the same way they once denied me. A week later, I received a call from an unknown number. No name saved, but the voice was unmistakable. Ilana, I just want to talk. That was it. No, I'm sorry. No, we were wrong. Just talk. I hung up. I didn't need a conversation to validate what I had built in quiet resilience. I didn't need a family dinner to patch a portrait that had once been torn where my space should have been. They say, family is irreplaceable. I agree. But I also learned, family can choose to erase you, without scissors. They just take another photo. Don't invite you. Don't say your name. Don't write about you. Don't ask about you. And from there, you disappear. Politely. I once stayed quiet, once believed I was unworthy. But then I built a life they couldn't control, couldn't label, couldn't deny. I didn't return to the room with peeling wallpaper. Didn't step into the kitchen where my mother used to write notes on my lunchbox every winter morning. Didn't stand before the cabinet where once sat my small Ilana, second place in math trophy, replaced a year later with Lydia's graduation photo. I had returned. Not through the front door, but through university hallways echoing my name. Through ethics classes that used my speech to teach legacy and endurance. Through medical newsletters writing Medvera Health, a movement led by a woman once erased from her own family's story. I didn't need to stand in front of my father and say, I survived. Because now, every brochure, every rural clinic powered by my tech, every student quoting my research, says it for me. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't ask for my place back. I was no longer the daughter who needed permission to exist in their narrative. I was the narrative. That evening, I sat in my office, city lights reflected across the window pane. My phone buzzed, an email from a former professor. We've added your keynote to the ethics curriculum, under Building Legacy from Invisibility. I read it slowly. Didn't smile, didn't cry. Just a lightness in my chest, the feeling of finally being seen. Not for my name, but for what I did. When I stepped out of that building, I carried nothing but my name. No hidden logos, no ID numbers, no nicknames on contracts. Just this, Ilana Monroe, real, unforgettable, unapologetic. During a brief interview at a later conference, the moderator asked, If you could send a message to those who once turned their backs on you, what would you say? I looked straight into the lens, smiled, and answered, "Nothing at all. I leave footprints, not resentment. Some call that victory. Some call it revenge. I call it freedom. Freedom from judgment. Freedom from the birthday invites that never came. Freedom from the family photos that no longer had a missing corner. Because I was never in them to begin with. I was no longer the disruption. No longer the one who ruined dinner conversations. No longer the forgotten daughter between two names carved into legacy. I was the woman who stepped into the light, without knocking. Ilana Monroe, CEO. Unapologetic, unforgettable, fade out. Silence, then freedom.